Is it already?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. So we are live. Welcome to our first session of UX design class. It's going to be 3 weeks, and in this week we have the privilege to speak to Effie Law, who's going to tell us everything that she knows about good practice for designing user experiences. And then we're just going to bombard her with any questions that we might have on the topic from our experience, from the choices that we've had to make designing websites, or just general questions if we've never designed websites. Thank you. So Effie, would you like to tell us a bit more about you and your experience and the general topic?
Yeah, so I hope I can share the slides with you a bit easier to follow my talk. So I use a share screen. Wait a sec. Oops. Okay. Where is my? Oops. Nope. So open then. Okay. Wait a sec. Okay, so I then share my screen. Okay, here. So can you now see my slides?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So if I turn into a slideshow mode, can you still see it?
Let's check it because it depends. Experiences have varied.
I can close like this. Can you still see it?
Yeah. That's perfect. But yeah, we can also try going into the slide mode. It should work.
Yeah. So actually, maybe I talk about my background. So I'm now in UK. So this is my background. I'm a psychology by training. Oh, it seems the sound doesn't work that well. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, you can still see the slides.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a psychology by training. But I have been working in the area of technology for more than 15 years now. So half computer science and half psychologist. I will name myself as such. So I joined the Department of Computer Science at the University of Leicester since 2005. So I've been here for quite a while. So, but you can see actually my research area, of course, in HCI is closely related to technology enhanced learning in other areas. So, but I'm focused more on methodologies. So I started with my research on usability. So then 2016, I started to look into the research on UX. At that time, I started to know Mark Hasentau. So I think everybody working in UX knows about him. So then I applied the methodology to different areas, as you can see in the blue bubble. So I work in education, in cultural heritage, in law, healthcare, transport. So this area, I apply the UX method and usability approach to study specific questions. So, but I have to clarify that basically, I'm not trained as a designer. So I know some principles and I read books about the UX design, but I more focus on evaluation, UX evaluation. So if you don't mind, I will go through some basic concept about UX and then the UX evaluation, and then I'll go to some UX design principles. So is it okay with you like that?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay.
I think we're mostly practitioners, so it's quite interesting to hear a perspective, grounded in theory.
Okay, so maybe show where I am. So you can see Newcastle up in the northeast. So Leicester is in the very central of UK. So we call ourselves in the heart of England. Rather you're convinced about it or not is another question. So this is where I am. So, and actually in 2009 I worked with a group of UX researchers. So some of them also practitioner. So at that time, we were quite curious about what is actually the definition of UX. So many definitions were out there. At that time, we found at least 16. There were actually more than that. So here in this slide, I highlight several. So the ISO definition, the one by Mark Hassenchild and Trutinsky in 2006, and one from the Wikipedia. So, and the ISO definition, as you can see here, is rather broad or too generic, in my opinion. So, but it's also, anyway, it tells something about perception and response, and also about highlight the anticipated use of a product. So this is, I think, for the ISO definition, there's also 3 notes associated with it. So I don't list it here. It's quite detailed how you can or you may measure UX or evaluate UX. So, and then from the Hassenthal and Trutinsky definition, original, it was also very long. But then, and I just highlight that actually the definition is focused on the user internal state, about the characteristic of the system, and also the context, so about the interaction where it occurs. So this is the highlight, the 3 dimension or 3 aspects that UX have to consider. And for the Wikipedia definition, actually, I quite like it. So it highlights several important characteristics of UX, and also is also addressed the usability issue subsumed by UX. So this is the 3 definitions I usually, in talking about UX, I will refer to. So one is ISO standards, one is more academic, and one is more general, and from the Wikipedia definitions. So many people still think what is actually the relation between usability and UX. I try to compare the 2 things. So in my personal opinion, I think usability is part of the UX, but they also have a different characteristic. So you can see the usability focus on more pragmatic quality, like the effectiveness, efficiency, and UX is focused more on the hedonic, like pleasures, like fun and engagement, enjoyment, this kind of quite a soft quality, so to say. And you can also see the usability focus on more on the do goal, and the UX focus on the be goal. For example, if you are able to find an e-book, so that you aim to look for, so you fulfill the do goal, but at the same time you're so proud of yourself, so you eventually you find the book that you want. So this kind of feeling competent is a kind of a be goal. So this is the difference between the usability and UX, different types of goal. So, of course, from the name, you can tell that for the UX to focus on more on the experience, emotion, affect. From the usability perspective, we focus more on the task and performance. So the other characteristic is about the holistic versus reductionistic. So maybe we can argue that actually both of them can be holistic and both of them can be reductionistic. So that's why I put a question mark on this comparison. So it depends on which context you are talking about. User experience can also be reduced into something you can measure. So another contrasting characteristic is highly subjective or partly objective, and also the experience can be very dynamic, change very frequently, and you can argue that usability is relatively persistent, but one can also argue that once you get used to the system, it can also be quite changeable as well. So, and one major difference now is, although UX have a definition ISO, but we still not yet have a standard metrics that like usability with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. But what lacking in the UX is we don't have such a metrics. So I think in industry, we're very eager to have such metrics that help us to compare across products and help us to report our findings. So, and actually, this is a kind of illustration showing the possible relation between usability and UX. Many people have a different conception.
May I ask a question about the previous slide?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with the terms holistic and reductionist. Could you just explain a little about what they mean?
Okay, sorry about so holistic. It means you have to see the experience as a whole, as a complete. So in a sense that some people argue that you cannot break it down like in this at this time moment. I'll break down my I'm 10% happy, 15% anxious, or 30% I'm nervous or depressed. So you can have to see it as a person, the whole as a feeling. I would say in general, I feel okay or I feel calm, but I cannot break it down into which component. And I also have to take the context. So now I'm in this talk, so I'm maybe my experience is very different because I'm in this situation online, but offline maybe I have a different emotions. So this is we have to take everything into considerations when you understand emotions or experience. But for the reductionistic, you can break it down into like a task performance, like the time on task, how many errors you have made. This is you can break it down to measure. This is the component of usability. But for UX, it's really difficult to break it down to measure like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope that is clear. So yeah, please stop me when I talk too fast or I assume that some terms you already are familiar with. Yeah, so this diagram is show the possible relations that people can see between usability and UX. So, and I personally, as I mentioned before, that I believe that usability is a part of the UX. So if a product is not usable, I think it's not that meaningful to talk about user experience in some extent. But some people argue that no, they can still two things be separate. So like the diagram on the top left corner, so usability and UX, they're overlapping with satisfaction. But there's a lot of theoretical debate out there, so I'll not go into details, but just let you know that there are different conceptions about the relation between usability and UX out there in the research community, also in practice. Yeah. So after talking about the relation between usability and UX, maybe some people that ask what is the difference between user experience and general experience. Maybe in psychology, experience is the term we have used for a long time, but why there's a new term called user experience? So maybe it's worth to look into the difference. So in general, an experience, I'm not talking about UX, I'm just a general one, it's a very subjective. Again, the term holistic, that means we have to take into consideration the context with whom I'm interacting with, or which product, so and so. And it's a very depend on situations. So maybe the same person, the same device, but if I in different situations, I talk to my boss, it's very different than I'm talking to you, even I use the same device. So this is we have to take the situation into considerations. And experience is a very dynamic change every moment, we can tell ourselves, but also meaningful in the sense that we are aware of our own emotions and we also attach some meaning to it. Or rather, we feel happy, we feel sad, or we sometimes or most of the time we know the reason why. So, and an experience also a very complex, so-called like a fabric of feelings, of our thought, of our action and emotions. There's some cognitive component, not necessarily, because when you talk about experience, people will think, oh, you talk about very emotional stuff. But actually, if looking into psychology research, emotion actually is a kind of the cognitive interpretation of our own actions. So this is one theory behind experience and emotions.
I think that this slide really shows about why it's difficult to evaluate, or set metrics to look at UX, because it seems like a very soft metric that's multidimensional, and unless people give you long form answers saying this is what I believe I'm doing right now, or this is what I feel, it's very difficult to kind of put everything on the same axis. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think this is very good point. So, and another thing is the experience is also very closely related to the psychological needs. So like the previous slide, I showed that if you found a book that you're looking for a long time, you feel very competent. This kind of a set of needs that we feel competent, we feel autonomy, or we use the mobile phone to call somebody. This is the relatedness, that the need that we fulfill by using the device, and then the device can provide us or meet our needs, then we feel happy or feel satisfied out of this experience. So, and also emotion have a evaluation function. So then if we know that we are somehow sad, so and we know the reason, we may change our behavior in order to make ourselves more happy. So this kind of cognitive evaluative functions closely connected to the action that what we are going to do or what we are doing. So as Hannah mentioned, this is very intricate interaction between all these components. This is very difficult to measure it, but still we try to do it to measure UX. So that the UX, if we really want to contrast the difference between the two things, so you can say UX is a subcategory of general experience, because the UX is mediated by interactive products. So this may help us to say UX is somewhat different from general experience if we take the interactive product as a mediator that make it different from the general experience. So this is you can tell. You can say that this is the two, why UX is different from general experience. So, and other thing that UX is different from usability research or usability practice is about the temporal aspect. So you can see this slide. So we talk about four time dimension of user experience. Before you use the system, so-called anticipated UX, as you remember the ISO definitions. So before you use the product, because of the brand, you know, if you use the Apple product, whatever Apple produce on the table, you will say, oh, before you use it, you may have a high expectation. You may already set your mood in a very good mood before you use the system. So this is the, if you measure the person experience at that time, we may show the positive emotions. But maybe after interacting with the product, so then he may confirm the expectation, or expectation may be disconfirmed. Maybe he feel happier, or he may feel sad after using the system, or disappointed. So this kind of, we also have the momentary and episodic. Momentary, that means for example, in playing a game, if you moment to moment, you measure how the player feel about the game, because the game change a lot, depends on the quest you are in. So then this is very difficult to measure the momentary user experience, because unless you ask the gamer where some device, the device can show some measure, then can indicate his or her emotion, then you can measure momentary. Otherwise, you just will disrupt the activity that a person is engaged in. So the momentary UX is quite a difficult thing to evaluate, to measure. So mostly we measured is episodic. That means there's an event, there's a beginning, there's an end, like a game episode or game quest. So after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, the gamer finished the game, then you can ask him how he feel, or how he, what is the emotion after playing that part of the game. So this is episodic. Of course, there is also long term. You can, after playing the game for a couple of weeks and a couple of months even, you can ask the gamer what is the feeling or the emotion about the game. So there's a different types of the UX so-called measurement, or the UX evaluations. So as you can see in this timeline. But I will not go into detail how you measure it in each of these phases, but just show that there is some this temporal dimension you have to consider. So
yeah, I think Effie, also, like, about half of us is not technical UX PhD student. So also, you know, just I guess, like, broad strokes, you can safely assume that that we're going to understand comfortably, and the more technical and theoretical, the more I personally find myself just be like, okay, it's like a whole other layer of abstraction.
Okay.
But it's very interesting nonetheless.
Okay, maybe I try to make it more concrete in this case. So I will show you some more slides and then go to the UX design. So just to let you know that this is the model out there. So this model may be useful for us to, for some practitioner when they want to design something, they use the model to guide them, or some will just design out of their intuitions or based on the experience. So maybe I'm not going into detail on this one. So maybe the measurability is just a debate out there in the UX community, rather UX can be measured or not. So I just show you the contrast between the two things. So some, again, go back to the question asked early on about the reductionistic and the holistic. So if you believe in the UX cannot be reduced into element, though make the measurements very difficult. So basically, this is this idea underlying the debate between the UX measurability. So, and going back about the measurement, actually, so if you know Daniel Kahneman, so he argued that basically what we report about experience always from our memory. So it's very hard to measure momentary experience. So that's because always just what we report we already experience. So then he introduced this peak end rule of experience. So that means if you have a strong experience at the end of an episode, that feeling will dominate your perception of the whole event. So this is the peak end. Maybe I don't go into detail. So and just to show my personal stance, I believe that UX can be measured, but it's very be careful what kind of data collection technique you use. So and also back in 2 years ago, I conduct a survey with a practitioner and to see, and also some researcher, so how they see which construct in UX can be measured. So you can see this diagram that in the middle one, the intersection one is ambivalent. Some UX people think this construct, UX construct, can be measured, but some they cannot. So they give different reasons. So you can get a feeling that actually this issue is not yet settled down. So about the measurability. Okay, so and I think go back to the UX design, I will have to say that I myself, as I mentioned, that I'm focused more on evaluation. So, but I also work with people work on design. So if I have to name 3 things very important for UX design, this is the question that Hannah sent to me. So I would think these 3 things is important for us to think when we do the UX design. First, must be human driven. So in the sense that we have, actually UX also derived from the UCD philosophy. We always put human or put user in the center. So we have to understand their needs, their preference, even before we design or do anything. So, and the second important thing is about theory base. So, of course, this is a long argument, rather design need theory. But of course, in my position, I think is necessary, as it's important. So because especially we draw the theory from social sciences, so to help us to understand why and how a design works or does not work. So, and this is, for example, psychological needs, as I mentioned, this is very important for us to understand why user prefer this or that. So because of the personal preference or needs, why they drop out or why they discontinue using something is based on their motivation, and how the mobile phone can help people to have the feeling of relatedness. This is related to social psychology. So we need some theory to back up our design, to understand our own design. So the third thing, I think, for this, because design and evaluation, they go hand in hand. So I would say the third thing important is the narrative derived. So when we do the evaluation, so people interact with the product and they share the stories about the experience. So from these stories, from these narratives, we can understand how they perceive or how they like the product or dislike the product, and what what kind of features contribute to their emotion and experience. So this is a 3 important thing, I think, for the UX design. So what is the following? I read the Mark chapters in this online book, so I highly recommend it. It's very easy to read and also very inspiring. So what I follow is based on this, what I understand from this chapter. So, and for design, so like this mobile phone, so as Mark gave example, so if a lady receive a message through a mobile phone from her husband when she's on a train ride, so she feel happy because it's a message from a loved one. So in this case, the mobile phone is it's just an instrument to carry some message to body, make somebody feel happy. So then, and this is very meaningful to the user of the mobile phone because it convey this message, and this message can somehow make a positive emotion, arouse positive emotion in her. So this linked to the need fulfillment. So because the lady feel connected with her husband, so this kind of relatedness can be fulfilled by using this mobile phone. So then, if you, as a designer, if you think this is this item, mobile phone, is a communication device rather than just a mobile phone itself, so then you may think differently how you make the connection between the lady and her husband, make them feel really close to each other. So like other experience, like the roller coaster or orange squeezer, so you can also different way to design it. So it depends on the experience you want to design for. You want to design for stimulation, design for excitement, enjoyment, or other experience. So if you know that what your product will try to bring out in the user, what kind of emotions, then you will guide your design in these directions. So like this orange squeezer, you have a different model there. You can like this very aesthetically pleasing one, or very practical, simple one. So again, is what your user needs. Maybe your user just like to appreciate the design of the orange squeezer.
What do you think about this aesthetically pleasing design of orange squeezer? Do you think that's like a good UX design? Because I can already see oranges splashing everywhere.
Sorry, what is
you know that because there's one that looks like a little ant, like that. I think this is the one that's supposed to be aesthetically pleasing on your slide.
Yeah.
So is that good UX design? You just kind of, you're providing a product that only meets one element of, I guess, the needs, the aesthetic needs. But is it, what is basically the trade-off between aesthetically pleasing and practical?
Yeah, it's exactly. So it depends really what your design for whom you're designing for. So if your end user, they just want to appreciate the beauty of this design, of this artifact, so the functional, they don't care that much. They will be just put on the table to appreciate this product. But if they really for the practical functional use, they may use a cheap one, this very simple, very like this plastic one you can see on next to the round silver one. So it really depends what your user prefer. So yeah, if they want to really not that care about the functional thing, just want to look and feel better, they may choose the end look like one. So if they care more about the efficiency, the effectiveness, for more focus on the pragmatic goal, then they will choose the orange, the green color ones, this simple one. Or some of them, they want to enjoy the pleasure of squeezing, so then you will design it such that support the squeezing experience better. So yeah, this is another dimension. You have to consider what kind of needs your user, or kind of emotion they expect from using this device. I hope I can answer the questions here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, as mentioned, that maybe sometimes we're technology-driven when we design something. That we know the technology is there, we want to make use of the technology, despite that we don't know actually what user wants or needs or prefers. So, but here we have to emphasize that design the experience first, like the roller coaster, like the orange squeezer. If you really want to make your user and experience that specific feeling or specific emotion, then you have to think that first before the technology, because somehow we say that technology is cool, but if we use it wrongly, then it cannot convey the right emotions in the user. So the questions of how to create and shape experience. So is in this case, so rather you design an iPhone or you design an office chair, so this will actually basically make no big difference. So the big difference is rather you consider the product first or you consider the experience first. So of course, for the UX design principle, you always have to consider the experience first, and as usual, then also have to consider the user needs and preference. So like I mentioned earlier, so maybe there are many so-called novel communication device out there. So like also the more and more personal informatics, the wearable device you have seen out there. So maybe the technologically wise, or they may not differ that much, or maybe they have no difference in algorithm underlying this personal informatics measure your heart rate, measure your walking space. So I think most important for the UX design, you have to understand what kind of experience you want to convey in your product, or want your product to elicit in your user. So, and what are the situations they will use the device? So will this situational factor will be too strong or too salient will influence the experience. So we have to take this into consideration. Like in mobile phone, if they use in a very noisy environment, then you have to find some means that somehow they can still enjoy the relatedness in a noisy environment. So this is the main message about the aesthetics of interaction. You have to think about the feeling, situation, and the boundary conditions. And this is the model that Hasentau proposed, that he said the 3-level model, the why level, the what level, and the how level. So then I would elaborate a little bit more about that 3 levels. So the what level is the things people do through an interactive product. So like calling a friend or listening to the music. So it's reflected by the product functionality. So it tied to the technology and or a certain product type. So the how level is mainly related to how you use it, the sensory motor. So you press a button, you navigate the menus. So this is more related again to the functionality. So, but then the what level and the how level, somehow we miss that this here is a lack of understanding about the user motivations. So then this come to the level of the why level. So the experience design is different from, or we want to emphasize about the experience design is to understand why first. So we have to before we determine the functionality, and we have to think about why we design that, and why, and before you start to do any coding or to do anything else. So you have to understand the needs of the user, because there needs to really set the tone what you're going to build. And so we hope that eventually they will share a good story through using the product. So, but currently you can see the most of the commercial product out there. So either the product are too practical, they just focus on one practical purpose, or they're too open-ended. It's up to the user to to define how to use the product. So we have to find a right balance, how the device can really guide the user or provide the opportunity for user to feel or to experience something, experience the emotion that they want to enjoy or prefer. So, and there's example about like a 3D TV set. So now there are a very expensive 3D TV set out there. So do we really want one? So, or should the vendor divide a 3D TV set with another goal, or not the 3D TV set so expensive, we can redesign the TV in the way that then can support the social relatedness, like the picture below. So somehow the TV set may be not that fancy, we don't have to use 3D, but we can design in such a way to support the user experience to connect with your friend or with your family who are far away. So this is the trade-off between you design an expensive product that your end user may not need it, they may not appreciate it, but your user may want to use this kind of a TV screen to connect to somebody that they miss or they are elsewhere. So again, this is an example trade-off between where you can invest or the industry where they should invest the money. So we have to understand that the user preference first. So I think that this is, I summarize what I understand about the mark chapters. So maybe now we can come to the discussions. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Effie, for giving this amazing overview of all the intricacies of UX design. I have tons of questions, and I'm going to use the fact that I introduced you first to ask the first question as well. So you mentioned in the beginning that you're a psychologist and you spend roughly the same amount of time working as a psychologist and researcher into computer science. So what are like some of the most important things that you brought from your psychology experience into your computer science experience, into your analysis of UX design?
Yeah, I think from my psychology background, I think it's very important I know about the theories and methodology. So in HCI, we actually borrow quite a lot of psychological research methods into HCI. So I think this is a very useful for me to integrate the technology and the psychology to understand better the field HCI. So and especially in computer science, so like in my department is other colleagues that they're more focused on theoretical computer science. I'm more on the people-oriented HCI. So my psychology background really helped me to understand the usability and UX in a much better way. Yeah.
But I guess like I was asking for like a specific example because you mentioned like the thinking fast and slow example, and I know it because I read the book, so I know about why, for example, lots of people in job interviews the first 30 seconds is the most important. So I know like I applied this principle of psychology to my interviewing. Like I guess like what principles like that from psychology do you think are most applicable to really building great products?
Okay, I think for me to understand is the motivations, the user motivation, and also the user needs. So I think this is again more and more user researcher point out that the user needs is something that we need to understand. So there's a model by Sheldon and also motivation theory, why user somehow continue to use a certain product, why they drop. They give it up or they shift to another product. So I think there's action, cognitions, motivations, and emotions. This the very complex relation between all these psychological constructs help me understand user experience a lot.
So does anyone else have questions? James, you always have questions.
I do always have questions, don't I? Effie, thanks so much for that explanation. It was super interesting. I'm just curious as to kind of what you see as the relationship between the academic and the research community, and then the actual, I guess, kind of professional activity of UX design, and kind of where it's housed in corporates and startups and so on. Can you comment a little bit on kind of the relationship between the research piece and the kind of implementation piece?
Okay, yes. So I think one thing, based on the survey I did in 2009 and I did another one in 2014. So I think the practitioner and the researcher, the main difference is practitioner, they want something to be done fairly quickly because of the time constraint, the resource constraint. So that's why they're very in need of some kind of metrics. They can measure UX very in a neat and a very efficient way. But for the UX researcher, we want to understand people's emotions and experience in more detail. That's why we emphasize, we use narrative, we use somehow very long-term studies. But I think in practice, in practitioner, so it's quite difficult to have a long-term study and also qualitative in nature. So I think this is a different demand of the industrial world and the research world. So this gap is not that easy to bridge. So because we are facing different constraints. So for research, we want to publish our paper and also understand phenomenon in a deeper way. But for practitioners, they really want to get send the product release and also get the so-called design evaluation cycle very fast. So this is the main difference I can see between the practitioner and researcher. Yeah.
I guess like a follow on this question is there anything that practitioners can learn from theoretical design? Just based on the research that you have done, what are some of the papers that people in business should read because it could really inform the work that they're doing, and they wouldn't know it because they're focused on metrics and short-term deliverables?
Yeah, I think one thing again about the time dimension. So I would emphasize about the temporal aspect of UX. So mostly people may just care about the momentary or episodic UX, but we also have to think about the long-term effect. So I was argue that we should look into the temporal UX model to understand in the long-term run when you're using a product or a system, so how the emotion can change over time. So and like the game, so after you play several maybe weeks or months, then the novelty effect waned and the emotion totally changed. So I think this is a very important aspect that the practitioner have to consider. Yeah.
And an additional follow-on, maybe kind of in the same vein, how do you think about how to make your research and kind of most useful to practitioners? Or is that a consideration for you? And do you think about how to kind of, in a sense, package the outputs that you produce to make them useful and engaging for the practitioner community? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So yeah, actually, I'm still very keen to identify some very useful metrics for the UX measurement. So that's why in 2014 I have that work trying to understand what people consider as something measurable, something not measurable, and if it's measurable, what will be the reliable way to or to interpret the findings. So because if we like usability was so broadly taken up by in industry, because we have this standard measure, and this measure somehow can also tell us something about the product. So, but in UX we are lacking this kind of metrics that can inform us reliably and somehow accurately how the user really feels. I think now the tool that we are using just very estimates, approximation, but may not inform us good enough how to redesign. So we evaluate, get some number, but that number may not reflect or may not inform us what's wrong with the product, why the user emotion did not happen like the way we want them to have. So I think the relation between the evaluation and the diagnosis of the reason is still not yet established. I'm hope that we can go to that step. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a question, and I mean, it just comes up on and on and on with many different products that I'm using. Like there is a conflict because you say, that it's a user-centric design, right? Yeah. So principles just do what the user wants. Now, I think that a lot of users think they want something, think they want a new feature here, a new feature there. But then from someone who is then designing, you want to limit the number of features because that's really what the user does not want. But they don't realize that is they don't want mess, they don't want confusion. I mean, do you know of any research on that specific topic, and how do you resolve this conundrum that I think anyone who's ever had to design anything has faced, features or clarity?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, of course, some people even say, don't ask user. They don't know what they want. This is another drastic claim. So, but of course, a different user have a different wish, and they can have a long list. So, of course, from a more realistic perspective, we have to prioritize this experience and also take into the so-called resources, the constraint into account. So, of course, we cannot build everything that the user want. We have our time, we have our budget constraint. So I think somehow through, especially now we talk a lot about agile UX, about lean UX. So in a team of multifunctional or cross-functional team, we know our technical constraint, we know the managerial constraint, we also have the UX perspective. I think eventually we have to come to a compromise, what we can do and what we cannot do. So of course, it's easier said than done. We hope that we can get to the optimum decisions based on our experience, based on also the team so-called ethos. They know what actually the product should be. So I think yes, through the communication, through the cross-functional team, can resolve this issue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very deep. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions before I continue asking some of the other questions that I have received? Because that one was actually not my question. I don't want to take credit for it. It was a friend who is in Americas who couldn't attend. So does anyone have any questions? Samuel?
I have a question. I have a question about kind of designing culturally portable user experiences. And have you done any work around kind of portability across cultures? Because I work in I'm based in South Africa, but I work in a number of different African markets, and a lot of the time in e-commerce, for example, we're kind of people are discovering e-commerce as they discover the internet, as they discover the mobile internet, and so on. It's kind of a lot of things all at once. The cultural context is very different, and a lot of the time, I guess things that are obvious to Western users are not obvious to users locally here. So, for example, I always come back to the example that an entrepreneur brought to my attention, but the idea of a wrench as to represent settings or configuration was something that was really confusing apparently to users in Nigeria because they'd never encountered it before. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's been this systematic assessment of how UX interacts with culture and ways of kind of smoothing the introduction of different kinds of experiences across cultures, whether that's possible, whether that's desirable.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So I just organized a workshop in Kai. So the workshop is called East-West Integration and Interaction for Human Engagement. So in that workshop, we looked at how the Western society and the Eastern society, how they see different design for engagement. So it's very, and the notion of engagement is very closely related to the UX. So I myself, maybe back 10 years ago, I was very interested in cross-cultural, but then my attention shifted to other directions. So I was aware that about, you mentioned about horizontal, vertical, this kind of menu configurations. I heard the cases before, so it's very interesting. So I know that there's a group of cultural UX there, but I'm not very actively involved in that group. So, for example, there's a study about the Danish and the Chinese the user, how they perceive different product user experience differently. So I can send you some reference, but I myself is not actively involved in this area. Yeah. And also the about the workshop paper, I can also share with you about the East-West difference. It's very interesting as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be super interesting.
I was just wondering along the same lines as James's question there. That also sounds like, I mean, there's the point you raised with the wrench icon, so the skeuomorphism and how that relates to both cross-culturally and to age groups as well. So I was wondering if there's been any work in UX relating to how that kind of boundaries crossed.
Yeah, very interesting question about the age groups, and yeah, I think definitely. So for the UX research, like in case of like example, I always think about the evaluations. So if you ask Eastern people to express their emotion, maybe not that straightforward. No, actually, in Western society also not that straightforward. But I think based on our social conventions, maybe we are less likely to express our emotion. So I always use the example of face reader. So a face reader you cannot use into certain type of nationals or people in a certain country, because the facial expression is not that drastic. So I think a face reader, as a good example, is a very cultural thing. So you cannot use it in like. They also always a joke that some people always have the poker face, then you cannot use face reader for this type. And also some of the graphic-based evaluation tool, like some cartoons or something, again, it's a very cultural thing. So different cartoon or different figures will be interpreted very differently in the East and West country or North and South. So I think we have to be very careful about the age issues. I don't know. I'm now just intuitively speaking. I think the younger people maybe they're more capable or more comfortable to express the emotion than the older people. So I think this is an interesting topic to investigate. I think it's exciting if we can do some systematic research in this area on this topic. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I have a philosophical question.
Wow.
No, but it's a very very interesting UX question actually, because I was just reading a book about UX from the year 2000. So that was just very interesting, out of this world. What kind of website they designed in the 90s, and you know, but one of the studies that they started looking at then was how using computers changes families. So, you know, like lots of kind of, you mentioned that UX evaluation is not about just the short term, but it's this emotional impact of after the use of a product. And, you know, like I keep thinking that UX design, for example, let's take Facebook, because that's an example that really comes to mind in daily experience. You're prompted time by time to only reinforce positive messages, to create, you know, and almost like a super positive view of what's happening to you and your perfect life and how everything is great. What are some of the most interesting studies that you have come across that follow a population that's large and representative for a long time, to kind of shed light on how technology and user experience design affects people and communities?
Okay, so I think there's many now studies come to my mind. So I would think that you were asking about the case, or you're about the methodology in this situation. So
I'm asking about specific cases. So I mean, what are the most interesting findings in the studies that you know of? what's the most interesting things that were discovered while looking at impact of UX in the long term? Because you also mentioned that that's something that research, academic research does that practitioners would not ever be interested to consider really.
Yeah, I think I go back to the question about I think practitioners basically they're also interested in the long-term UX, but in practice, in reality, they may not have the resources to follow the case. So, but just clarify this point. And about the cases, I try to think more illustrative one. For the long term. Cannot tell from the top of my head. There's so many cases.
I'm very happy to have actually asked a difficult question like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I remember very recent studies about it's more going into the direction of sustainability of HCI. So they install a system or a device in a household and to observe that how the household family interact with that device. So the devices inform them how much energy they have saved. So these kind of things you really have to observe over time. So in the beginning, the novelty will really attract the family members. So they will discuss about this device, the display, and it's really draw the members close together. But as times go by, they will relapse back to the old habit of using energy. They turn on the light without turning off when they left the room. So then the device also play a less important role in the family because they are now used to the existence of the device, and then the display is now less exciting as in the beginning they installed that device in the household. So this can tell that how can we sustain the people motivation, especially this kind of persuasive device? You want to change people behavior, but people just get used to it, and they will forget. They will relapse to the the old habit. That may not be bad. So I think this is an interesting thing for long-term study. So how so-called persuasive or transformative technology can change individual member in a household or as a family, as a unit, how they can perceive each other behavior. Maybe the mom wants the children to change the behavior, but the children does not care about the device display. So this can create some tension in the family as well. So yeah, I remember this case is quite a recent one, yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, we are 3 minutes of the time. If you would agree, I have one final question because probably you're also wondering what is this class where I have to speak to some PhD students in UX, but also a group of people who are coming from different backgrounds, including an online class which we organized in the fall, and including our developer Agnieszka. Or James, who is a personal friend. So I wanted to ask my final question about community design, because the interesting thing that this class is that we literally are launching a new technology to bring online learning and make it more social. And as part of the course on UX, we are also looking at the UX of the platform that we're doing the course on. So what are some, and you know, this community-led design is something that is a very interesting field, and I know especially at Newcastle, you know, that's definitely something that that there have been lots of papers written about. But do you know anything about this this kind of community-led design field, and do you have any advice for us as we kind of launch into it?
Yeah, in this regard, I think I should say that I am learning. Actually, I was learning from the Newcastle group. So I just bought the book by John and Peter. the recent book Taking Apart. I'm reading it. So for the community design, I think Newcastle is very strong in this research area. So I dare not say I can give any advice. I just want to to share. If you have any experience to share with me, I will be very happy to know more about this community-oriented design. I'm learning myself. Yeah.
Cool. So thank you, Effie, one more time for taking the time to speak to us and explaining all of the concepts and answering all the difficult questions that we had. How was the experience for you? Was it interesting? Was it very different from like a normal class that you normally have?
Yeah, my experience, I think it's very interesting because this maybe I would say the first time I so-called I taught online like that. So and the audience are very different. So because maybe it's a mix of I think some of you are practitioners, some of you are researcher, and different experience or different understanding of UX. So I think it's interesting and challenging experience. Okay.
Hope we weren't too terrible with difficult questions. If we meet next time, we'll try to ask easier ones. So thank you, Effie, one more time. Thanks for everyone for joining. And reminder, if you haven't registered to the platform, please do so because the time is ticking and we all need to be on the website before the course closes officially. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks.